What's good, my people? Today is officially the start of Fist of the North Star Fridays, as the remake has officially dropped as of the recording of this video. I just finished both episodes and I got a lot to say. I didn't script this video, so it's probably going to be a lot of rambling, so get ready for that. But I did take some notes and highlighted some things that I wanted to go over. Before I get into the negatives and positives, I want to make it clear. I am so happy that this exists. I am very happy and very grateful that we are getting more Fist of the North Star content in the big 2026. So a lot of what I say may come off as overly negative or nitpicky, but trust and believe, I am so glad that this exists. So I think I'll start with the negatives, since one of them is pretty obvious, and that being that it is a CGI 3D anime. And in my previous Fist of the North Star video, where I said that it doesn't look as bad as the first trailer presented it to be, I am now more so in between that, right? Where it definitely isn't as bad as that first initial teaser trailer, but it is still CGI anime. So if you've seen a CGI anime, you know what to expect. It could be not CGI, and that would be better, simply. I do think it's a little rough around the edges. The art style in particular, like, it just doesn't lend itself well. For instance, Bat and Reen look very weird in parts, mostly Reen. They both kind of look older than they should be, and I don't know how to best describe it. It just looks a little rough. And the same thing kind of applies to Kenshiro, where I feel like early season Kenshiro should not look as, for lack of a better term, blocky. Like, let's take a look at how Kenshiro looked in their earliest parts of the manga, compare that to the original anime, and we can even compare that to the cover art of Volume 1 of the re-released of the Fist of the North Star manga. And comparing all of that to how Kenshiro looks in this new anime remake, he just seems so, again, I don't know what word I'm looking for, so I'm just going to say blocky. It all around just makes him look a little weird, and I feel like he should just look a lot softer, at least in these earlier parts. I feel like the Kenshiro that we have now is more suited for, like, towards the Rao arc, and maybe even after Rao, but for what we have right now, I feel like Kenshiro just should look a little bit softer, but that's just me. That's a nitpick. As for the animation itself, it's a hit or miss. There were a lot of scenes that I felt looked very stiff, and even some of the fight scenes looked a bit stiff. It just, all around, could have used a lot more fluidity. But this is a problem that's plagued all CGI anime. I don't think there's a single CGI anime that doesn't have stiff looking movement or stiff looking scenes in general. If we were to compare this to something like Kengen Ashura or even Fist of the Blue Sky Regenesis, they have the exact same stilted movement outside of its fight scenes, right? And then speaking of the fight scenes, those actually looked pretty good. Again, mostly hit or miss. Some scenes were really good and some were just less fortunate. I wanted to highlight the first display of Hyakuretsu Ken, and just, again, I said this in the, I think I said this in the first reaction video I did for the anime remake. I said how this looks really good in the anime and it's not going to look good in CGI, and I was practically 100% correct. This scene is a great example of what I mean when I say hit or miss, because, like, it starts off and it looks kind of jank, and then it transitions and looks a little cool, and then it loops back around to being jank, and then it has a cool final shot. Like, I absolutely didn't hate it, but I just know for a fact it would have looked better if it was all hand-drawn animation. And that's another thing, the 2D hand-drawn animation scenes, they were all great. They were all great. I have literally zero complaints about any of the hand-drawn animated scenes. The problem with them, however, is that they are so far and few, and they seem to be completely random. Obviously, I can't speak for the director or producers or anyone in the staff, but it doesn't really seem like there was any rhyme or reason for which scenes got the 2D treatment. For instance, there was one scene with Zeed where the entire scene was them going to the village, and the entire scene was CG, regular CG anime, and then Zeed smirks And in that 2 frames of him smirking, they made it a 2D animation. I have no idea why. Like, why did that need to be drawn? Why was that given the 2D treatment? No clue. And then in the second episode, something similar happens where Spade, the entire scene with Spade is CG, and then his eye twitches, and during that eye twitch, which again is like 2 frames, it's 2D drawn. Like, why did that get the hand-drawn animation treatment? I'm not seeing why certain scenes are getting it and other ones aren't. I feel like it's something that should have been saved for the action scenes, in my personal opinion. And it would have kept the 𝐤𝐞𝐜𝐬𝐞 from looking so jank in parts of its animation, you know? So again, really not sure what's going on there. There was this one hand-drawn scene of Kenshiro ripping off his shirt because he was pissed off, as he does, and that scene looked great. And that's a scene that I do think should have gotten the hand-drawn animation treatment. Like, I agreed with that one, but then it went right back to CG, and I'm like, well, why couldn't the fight be CG, or at least part of the fight be CG? Another thing that gets the 2D animation is most of the deaths, like all the deaths where the character explodes and the guts pop out of their body, those are all, or at least from what I can remember, most of them were drawn. And I have no problem with that. But again, I don't really understand why. And looping back around to the CG itself, there was this one scene where Ken was held up in the prison, right? And you know in the manga where they take his cloak and remove his shirt and then it shows his scars? Yeah, in this anime, they didn't bother with the removing of the shirt. I guess that would have been too much for the character model. So they just took off the cloak and then they could just see all of his scars through his shirt. And I'm just like, oh, well, okay. Like, again, it's another nitpick, I know, but I just couldn't help but notice. Now, something that this anime has done, which I'm pretty sure the original anime did a lot too, I really can't remember, but they added some fight scenes that weren't in the manga. For instance, Kenshiro versus 𝐁𝐸's men. There's a whole fight between him and 𝐁𝐸's army, and it lasts for a good couple of seconds. It was overall, it was pretty cool. I could say it's pretty cool. It wasn't the best, because again, this was all CG. I feel like it would have looked better if it was drawn, but it did what it needed to do, I guess you could say. And what really surprised me was the fact that they added this in, since this wasn't really a fight in the manga. Kenshiro kills a couple of his goons in one kick, and then he just moves right on to 𝐁𝐸. Whereas in this remake, he does the same kick to the first goons, and then he fights a whole army, and then he gets to 𝐁𝐸. I didn't really hate the inclusion, since it was just to show off Kenshiro being cool. Like, I get the point of the scene. But it was kind of funny to think about in hindsight, because it's like, well, why is 𝐁𝐸 still standing here just holding Rin and not killing her as he watches Kenshiro just mow down an entire army right in front of him? Like in the manga, it was pretty quick. He kicked the 3 guys and immediately was in front of 𝐁𝐸, and those guys exploded. Whereas in this anime, he kicked the 3 guys, they explode, and then he fights an army, and he's fighting them for a good couple of seconds, and 𝐁𝐸 is still just watching as if like nothing's happening. And then he doesn't react until after all of that is done. Kind of a weird choice, but at the same time, like I said, I get it, just to make Kenshiro look cool, completely understandable. But I digress. I think that would be the end of my negatives. Episode 2 was really good. Like, the complaints I had for episode 1 would still factor into episode 2 as far as like stiff and stilted animation, the CG scenes, stuff like that. But overall, the pacing of both parts, I would say the pacing of both episodes were pretty good. Which is funny because episode 1 literally adapts a single chapter. Episode 1 only adapted chapter 1. Granted, it did have a handful of scenes that weren't in chapter 1. For instance, the episode starts off with Kenshiro versus Sheen. Doesn't show a lot of it, just, you know, shows a bit of it. And then the whole fight with 𝐁𝐸's army, like I just spoke about a moment ago. Those were not in the original manga. Those were not in chapter 1 at least. Or the Sheen and Kenshiro fight, that particularly was not in chapter 1. The 𝐁𝐸 army fight wasn't in it at all. But despite that, I didn't really have an issue with the pacing of the episode at all. You would think that an episode adapting a single chapter would have abysmal pacing, but I felt like it hit the beats like pretty spot on. Like, it was a very faithful adaptation. Aside from that one scene and the opening scene with Sheen, aside from those, it was a very faithful adaptation, and I have zero problems with the pacing. That's just me personally. Now, episode 2 adapts chapters 2 and 3, and again, I feel like it did it very well, which is, you know, I guess that's a positive, right? That's commendable. The way they were able to adapt a single chapter and make the pacing feel good, and then adapt 2 chapters and make the pacing still feel just as good. Like, it's one of those things where I don't think they needed to cut any scenes, and simultaneously, I don't think there's anything that should have been particularly added. I feel like they did this about as well as I would have wanted them to. Because as things stand right now, for the first half of Fist of the North Star, so basically everything up until Rao, I would love just a one-to-one adaptation. This isn't like Bleach 1000 Year Blood War, where there's a bunch that needs to be fixed or there's a bunch that needs to be expanded on. It's not a situation like that. This is just, I just want a faithful adaptation showing me more of the story that I loved, you know? And for these first 2 episodes, they did exactly that. Another thing I wanted to compliment were these final shots in both episodes. Well, it wasn't the final shot of episode 2, but you get what I mean. They both looked phenomenal. These were hand-drawn shots, and I wish more of the anime looked like this, admittedly, but these were still really good shots. Also, the OST is something that I have to compliment. Obviously, the opening and the ending, yeah, those are bangers, but what really got me was this song when Kenshiro brings the old man to the village to drop off those rice seeds, and everybody was cheering. That OST was going so hard. That shit right there was beautiful. Mwah, chef's kiss. Great song right there. Can't wait to hear more of this series OST. And speaking of, we gotta talk about the ending. 𝐢𝐢𝐧𝐝 Torimorose. Yes, it's back. However, it is a remix. Now, I don't like the remix nearly as much as the original, because I wholeheartedly believe the original is just something you don't tamper with. Like, that song right there, you don't mess with 𝐢𝐢𝐧𝐝. You just don't, you know, you leave it be. But they remixed it for this. However, I don't think the remix is bad under any circumstances. Like, would I listen to this over the original? No, absolutely not. But can I still listen to this without skipping it? Yes, because it's still a banger. And something else I really liked is the kanji that pops up after Kenshiro does one of his hokuto shinken techniques. I think that was a really cool touch. Again, it would have looked better if it followed 2D animation, but you guys get it. I could go on and on about how it should have all been 2D instead of CG, but you know, it is what it is. Overall, I think I would say I'm definitely pleased with these first 2 episodes. Next week, we should be getting episodes 3 and 4 on the same day as well. And then after that, I think it's all just 1 episode a week. And I can definitely say I'm looking forward to it. Like, I have my negatives, I have my nitpicks, but it doesn't at all take away from the fact that Fist of the North Star is still one of my favorite pieces of fiction ever. And this anime is about as well as it can be, still doing it justice. You know, it could be worse. At the end of the day, it could be worse. And like I said at the beginning, I'm just happy to have more Fist of the North Star content in modern day. So anyway, for where I stand right now, I'm satisfied with these episodes. I'm looking forward to more. If I had to rate these, episode 1, maybe like 7 out of 10. Episode 2, 8 out of 10. Let me know what you all think if you've watched it as well. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next week, because as I said, I will be reviewing every episode until it's all over. Okay, because I love Fist of the North Star. It means so much to me. So yeah, thank you all for watching as always, and I'll catch you guys next week.